Hey everybody, thank you for joining episode 28 of The Green Life. Today's guest is a recurring guest. He was here for episode 17 of The Green Life and today is back for 28 to talk about Alzheimer's disease. His name is Dr. John McDougall. Dr. McDougall has a very interesting practice. He's been a doctor for a very long time and he moved his practice into lifestyle medicine, helping people heal with plant-based nutrition, and his focus is on starches. We discussed this on the last episode and I urge you to check it out. It was very good. And today we're going to dive into the topic of Alzheimer's disease. This is very important and a very sad and devastating disease that we want to really learn more about, and I'm really curious to hear what Dr. McDougall has to share. So fasten your seatbelt and let's get going with Dr. John McDougall. Thank you, Dr. McDougall, for being back on The Green Life. How are you today?
Good.
Awesome.
Okay, excited to talk to you folks. I assume that Europe is burning, just like the United States is.
Yeah, we have a lot of fires over here. Thankfully, where we are, we're safe, but Portugal has been hit hard.
Well, I hope somebody's paying attention because, every place you look, the earth is warming.
Yeah.
I want to give your listeners a heads up. There are a couple of things they ought to consider. They're working on fossil fuels. That's good. I mean, we need renewable sources of energy. We got to stop the coal, the oil. We got to stop that. And period. This has to be done. The second thing we do is we have to change the majority of people on this planet to a starch-based diet, which is the diet that most people who've ever walked this earth consumed. Like, for example, the Aztecs and the Mayans, those were known as the people of the corn. For 1,300 years, their society existed on corn. The Incas lived on potatoes. The Ukrainians, the people in Egypt and Iraq and Iran, which you're hearing about every day in the news, they live in the breadbasket of the world. That's bread. And when you think about Asia, you think about rice. See, we just go back to the traditional diet of people that is starch. And when we do that, we can reduce the production of global warming gases more than anything else. And I'll tell you, you can find this out on my website, a new website my foundation developed.
Yeah, we talked about it last time, and I actually will link that episode.
All right.
On this because it was very good and you gave a lot of information on that. And you're right. I mean, if we don't notice, what are we doing? Okay.
Well, but I just want to give you one more hint. Okay.
Go ahead.
We've got to start a groundswell from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're going to go to my foundation website, which is McDougallFoundation.org. But I want you to write this down. The only way to cool the planet immediately is to reflect energy off the surface. And that energy is coming from sun. And there's a website dedicated to doing that with mirrors. I'm not joking. Write it down. It's called meer.org. And you ought to watch the website. You can also, I did an interview with Dr. Yitao, the founder, on my website, which you can look at McDougallFoundation.org. But www.meer.org. If we don't respond soon, and we got to get the heat off the planet, we're cooked. All right, let's get on to the subject today.
Well, you're right. And I actually had an episode with Nikki Florio about geoengineering, and we talked about exactly similar thing. Well, about obviously what's happening with the global warming situation, but also very connected to what you're going to talk about today, heavy metals. Aluminium specifically you are going to talk about, and that's one that came up. So, okay, everybody, we're going to talk about Alzheimer's disease, which is a scary, devastating disease. A lot of people are very afraid of it, and for very good reason. And Dr. McDougall, I read your articles, which also will be in the show notes. And I think you give a very fair point about this topic. And I believe you have obviously a presentation that you're going to show everyone. So if you're listening to this on Spotify and you want to see the slides, you can go on YouTube and they will be there. If you're listening just on the podcast audio, that's okay. You can still follow along, but this is a very important subject. So if you can check out the slides, please do so. Okay, so whenever you're ready, Dr. McDougall.
Okay, I just want you to know the slides are being shown for the first time on your website.
Thank
you. They'll be shown again later on, but this is a presentation I put together. It's just part of a presentation called Aging Gracefully and Preserving Your Mental Capacities. And it's a 2-lecture, 2-hour discussion of the scientific literature on how you keep your faculties and how you live as long as you can reasonably, because we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And this is the way you get the most out of life. So this is part of a package that you can find out more about if you go to drmcdougall.com, which is our website. Okay, so I'm going to show you brand new, never been seen. You're putting it on YouTube, so I might get into trouble for this, but I don't care. You ask. You know, the way this started out is you asked me about type 3 diabetes. And I only heard about type 3 diabetes, maybe a year ago myself. It was always type 1, which is where there's no insulin produced. Okay, the pancreas doesn't produce insulin. This is a fatal disease. You always have to have insulin. And then there's type 2, which is due to being too fat. It's a consequence. It's an adjustment that takes place when you gain 30, 40, 50 pounds more than you should weigh. You develop insulin resistance. And by the way, if you're interested in this type 1, type 2 diabetes, you go to YouTube, put in McDougall and diabetes, and you'll find a whole lecture I gave on it. All right, so that type 2 is 100% curable. Mm-hmm. Okay? All you got to do is lose weight. And the most effective way to lose weight is to follow a traditional diet, a diet based on starches like corn, rice, potatoes, etc. The traditional diet of people. Always 100% curable. And then there's something in between, which I'm not going to discuss, called type 1.5 diabetes. Mm-hmm. Well, there's this notion, which is what you brought up to me, which stimulated me to tell you about Alzheimer's disease. There's this notion that as diabetics progress, they dement because they have a metabolic handicap. They run this high blood sugar. They can't defend and repair as well. So they have kidney failure, they have heart failure, they have gangrene, they have all kinds of problems. Okay, as they continue to dement, and they do, but at an accelerated rate, what they've done is they've called that type 3 diabetes, and they've connected this to Alzheimer's. They're not connected, except for the fact that this is a form of dementia. Alzheimer's has a specific cause, and the cause is aluminum poisoning. The metal aluminum causes it. Now, I'm going to give you the scientific references for all the things I say. Okay, you can look them up. You can see that I'm not exaggerating. I've been talking about this for almost 40 years. The aluminum industry is very powerful. Mm-hmm. You know, they sell fluoride, they sell aluminum, they got lots of money. And they've tried to spin the story into one where the public doesn't know or believe that Alzheimer's is due to aluminum poisoning. The evidence is overwhelming. Look it up. Let's see if I can get us on the slides. All right, here we go.
People don't even know that fluoride is a byproduct of aluminum.
Well, it is, and it's a big industry. Okay, so of dementia, there are various causes, like you have little strokes or big strokes. You can have Parkinson's disease. You can have alcoholism contributing to dementia. But about 60 to 80% of dementia is caused by Alzheimer's. So it's a big deal. So how do you diagnose Alzheimer's? Well, it's diagnosed by a visit to the doctor. No test for it. You visit the doctor, and the doctor sees that you've been demented by the stories told by your family. And the doctor sees this as a rapid dementia. In other words, you're losing your ability to learn. You're losing your memory. It's generally in older people, and it progresses rapidly. That's how you make the initial diagnosis. You only make the definitive diagnosis by doing a brain biopsy, which you don't want to have done. You can have sophisticated technology like MRIs and PET scans. They just add to the diagnosis, but they don't make the diagnosis. I'll show you how you make the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. First of all, in 1901, Louis Alzheimer, he discovered Alzheimer's disease. Would you just guess that? And he found the first case, and this was a very rapid progression of a patient. Okay, just like I described to you, rapid progression of dementia in 1901. And back then they had microscopes. And after she died, he took slices of her brain, and he found some characteristic lesions. These were called senile plaques and neurofibril tangles in 1901, more than 100 years ago. And that's the way the diagnosis is made under a microscope, seeing these neurofibril tangles and these senile plaques. By 1926, there were 33 cases. By World War II, we had 240 million people with this disease worldwide. Now, 5.7 million Americans of all ages are living with Alzheimer's disease. And soon, like in 2 or 3 years, there'll be 7.1 million Americans in the US. And this is a worldwide disease where people eat the Western diet. Okay, so this is the way you make the diagnosis: is you look under the microscope and you see 2 characteristic lesions. They're called senile plaques, which are these brown guys right here. You see that? And neurofibril tangles, which are inside of the neurons. See this protein right here is all tangled up? Okay, so unless you see this pathology, you don't have the disease. These are called pathognomonic lesions, which mean that you name the disease if you see the pathology. Okay, so that was the initial discovery back 101 years ago by Dr. Alzheimer. But since then, we've had more sensitive technology. And we have, we can do microanalysis of these plaques with nuclear magnetic resonance techniques, these very sophisticated machines. You can look inside the plaque. And what you see inside the plaque is a central core of aluminum silicate. Always. Okay, if you don't have the central core of aluminum silicate, you don't have the senile plaques and the neurofibril tangles. If you don't have the neurofibril tangles and the senile plaques, you don't have Alzheimer's. Okay, that's how you make the diagnosis, is you see it. Well, Alzheimer's disease is a disease mostly of the Western diet. Now, I'll show you the connection here between aluminum and the Western diet. Asians on rice diets have much fewer cases of Alzheimer's than, say, Europeans. Japanese Americans compared to Japanese who live in their native country. Japanese Americans, say for those who live in California or Hawaii, have much higher incidence of Alzheimer's disease than their counterparts who live on rice-based diets. We live on, even if you're of Japanese heritage, we live on meat and dairy-based diets and oil and stuff that's poisonous. All right, countries high fat, high cholesterol diets, which of course means meat and dairy. You have higher incidence of Alzheimer's. It's actually doubled compared to places where people eat a starch-based diet. Remember, starch is rice, corn, potatoes, wheat, barley. You get this. And animal experiments confirm that Alzheimer's is connected to feeding the animals the Western diet. Now, here's the connection. Is we eat, the Western diet is an acid-forming diet. Okay, it's a high-protein diet. Proteins break down into amino acids. Animal products have a high prevalence of 2 sulfur-containing amino acids. They're methionine and cysteine. They break down to sulfuric acid. So forkful after forkful, spoonful after spoonful of meat, fish, poultry, red meat, dairy, cheese, you're taking in high acid food. And this acid that you get from the Western diet increases the absorption of aluminum in the gut into the body and transfers to those brain cells that I just showed you. So there's the connection. Okay, Alzheimer's is a disease of inflammation. And unfortunately, many folks out there have been confused by inflammation. They think inflammation is somehow the cause of problems. No, inflammation is the response to injury. Like, for example, if you burn your hand, it becomes inflamed. It's red, swollen, hurts, hot. That's the way the body heals, through inflammation. But inflammation is secondary to the injury, always. So what injures the brain? The neurons. Well, what injures them is aluminum, which is better absorbed and assimilated into the brain on the Western diet. Now, let's talk about aluminum. Aluminum is a metal. Okay, it's not a nutrient. In other words, you don't need to eat aluminum to be healthy. You have to eat iron and copper and a few other minerals, but not aluminum. In 1973, what they did is they did the first experiments where they took brains of people who died of Alzheimer's, compared them to brains of people who died of strokes. And so all they had to do is they had to just look at the brains under the microscope, and they could tell which ones had Alzheimer's. And they ground them up, and they found that people dying of Alzheimer's had a much higher content of aluminum in their brain. If you expose animals to, and I know some of you are against animal experimentation, but it provides information. You expose animals to aluminum and they get Alzheimer's, like disease. And if you look at their brains, you find these senile plaques, these neurofibril tangles. We've also discovered that wherever the content of aluminum is high in the drinking water of a population, they have a high incidence of Alzheimer's disease. So aluminum is absorbed by the intestinal tract, and this absorption increases with age. So you get the aluminum in your body. I'm going to tell you where you get it from in just a minute. Mm-hmm. Get the aluminum in your body. The question is can you get it out of your body? And there's a way to get it out of the body, and that's through a chelator. And I'm going to give you a couple of chelators as we talk about this. Things that grab aluminum from the brain and the body and cause it to leave the body through the intestinal tract and through the urinary tract. All right, where do you get aluminum? Okay, you get it from various processed food products. Like, for example, some baking powders have a very high content of aluminum in the baking powder. Not all. You have to look for one that doesn't. Various cake mixtures and creams and creameries, and you got to look at the package label. It says aluminum on it, or alum. They think they're going to fool you by calling it alum. And you can see the amount of aluminum that's present in these particular foods. It's like really high compared to, say, for example, bananas and green beans, which is real low. The other way that you get aluminum is by how you cook. If you cook in aluminum pots or pans, the aluminum dissolves out of the pots and pans, and it gets in your food, and you eat it. So you don't want to use any aluminum pots and pans or utensils. If you're going to use nonstick, you need to get a nonstick coating, like a ceramic coating, and it coats aluminum and protects you so you don't get the aluminum in your body. So you want to be careful about your cookware. It also depends on what you cook in your pots and pans. For example, if you cook very acidic things like tomatoes, then you end up getting a lot of aluminum in your pots and pans. That's if you use aluminum pots and pans, of course. Mm-hmm. You can also get it in your medications like Citrocal. A lot of medications have aluminum in them. Some antacids like Citrocal increase aluminum absorption by 8 to 11 times.
For those who don't know what Citrocal is, can you just...
Citrocal is calcium oxalate antacid. Okay. It's a brand name, Citrocal. But if you look at you go through your grocery store and you look at, where they sell antacids, and you look at the label, it says calcium citrate. Okay. Calcium citrate causes the intestinal tract to open up and absorb tremendous amounts of aluminum. So you got to be careful about the medications that they not contain aluminum and that they don't contain calcium citrate.
Do they need to tell you when they contain aluminum, or is it a level where they don't have to disclose?
You should expect to find it on the aluminum package, okay, on the packaged product. Now, you'll hear that tea contains aluminum, but but the aluminum in tea is highly complex and not absorbed. Now, again, you see the references to everything I talked about down in the right-hand corner. So if you want to look up the articles, you just take and copy the reference, put it in Google, and you can read the paper. Okay? Pretty much everything is available for you for open access. And you can read what I know and see that it's true.
I have a question here, sorry, on the last slide. So you obviously make sense if we cook with a cookware that is aluminum, it makes sense. Okay, we get it. But how does it get in all these foods?
How does they get it in the foods? Well, it's mainly added to packaged foods. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, is it added or is it just a contamination for, say, tin or something?
No, it's added during the manufacturing process.
And why?
So why do they do it? It makes the product more usable and sellable. Wow. It's a stabilizer. For example, a cake mixes, it's a stabilizer. And they add it. Like cream and processed cheese and pancake mixes. It's part of creating this highly desirable, highly palatable product for you. They put aluminum in it.
Wow, I'll be honest, I did not know that they added it. Well, I mean, I know fluoride is a byproduct and it's in toothpaste for the most part, in water in the US and other parts, but I never even thought about, I mean, I know it's in baking powder and I just wondered if it's from the tin that they put it in, but wow, okay, so they added on purpose.
All right, there's one more source of aluminum that you might be interested in, that's baby formula. Soy formula has extremely high content of aluminum in it. And it may be because soybeans absorb from the soil lots of aluminum, but I think it's more likely that the containers, the tanks that they process the soy milk that they make baby formulas out of. A very high content of aluminum in baby formula, soy formula. Gosh. Well, you know how you feed a baby, don't you?
Oh, you should feed him from your breast.
I think so. I think that's probably how you're supposed to do it.
I think so.
All right. Any other questions about this slide?
No, this is good. Thank you.
All right. So what we've discovered is that, what we discovered is that, when you look at the brain under a microscope, that those people who have the most severe Alzheimer's disease have the greatest number of senile plaques in a stalk of the brain called the olfactory lobe. You see it is right here, olfactory lobe, okay? Mm-hmm. This is a stalk of the brain which goes directly into the nose. So aluminum is inhaled in the nose and it's absorbed from the neurons, which are hair, they call them hairs, nasal hairs, but they're just little nerve fibers that come from they go into the stalk of the brain. So people who have some of the worst Alzheimer's disease have a large number of senile plaques and neurofibril tangles in their olfactory lobes. So how do you get aluminum through your nose? It used to be through manufacturing, like doing brake linings or other industries to build lots of stuff. They use aluminum. You know how much aluminum is used in metals. Yeah. Good grief. Our electrical vehicles all have aluminum as part of their product. Okay, but today what happens is people spray every morning large amounts of aluminum chloride in their nose as they apply antiperspirants. Yeah. Okay, this is the greatest exposure of a person to aluminum, and their greatest risk of getting Alzheimer's is by applying antiperspirants, particularly the sprays. All antiperspirants are based on aluminum chloride. All. It stops perspiration. Now, a deodorant is different. Okay, deodorants, cause a different scent. But if you want to stop your perspiration there, you're going to get something that has aluminum chloride in it. Well, the industry knows this. They discovered this a while back. And so if you look at most of the antiperspirants these days, they're roll-ons.
Yeah.
Well, the skin does absorb some aluminum. So I can't say that's a safe thing to do. And, the best thing to do is just sweat. Eat a good diet because you stink as a result of the foods you eat.
True.
You know that garlic causes body odor. What do you think eating dead animals causes you to smell like?
Yeah. True.
Okay.
And
So
actually,
anyway,
not coincidentally, in breast cancer cancers, they have found aluminum into the breast tissue right next to the armpits, right? So it's not by coincidence, and so we can see another correlation to using this heavy metal on the body.
okay. Well, we originally discovered this. When we started doing dialysis. And we gave our patients, and this is when I was a young doctor, we gave our patients aluminum hydroxide to complex the phosphorus that came in the food that they were eating, which are animal products mostly. Yeah. And they got dementia from the aluminum hydroxide. That's how this all kind of started out. Yeah, aluminum is a poison. It is not a nutrient. You should not be in contact with it. It's easy to avoid. You just have to know where it comes from. When my wife Mary cooks, for example, she cooks potatoes. She'll put parchment paper over the potatoes before she seals them in with aluminum foil. Our food does not touch aluminum. If you have any doubt about Alzheimer's being due to aluminum poisoning, look up the reference I just showed you. It is enhanced by the Western diet. Yeah. So the absorption of that aluminum into the body is enhanced by the highly acid Western diet. The evidence is there. I know the aluminum industry doesn't want you to know about it. Okay, so how do you get rid of it? Well, there was some work done in the 1980s where this investigator, he actually did a controlled trial. He took people both had equal levels of Alzheimer's disease, and he did movies of them over a period of time, a year or two. And he put one group, a controlled trial, put one group on shots of desferoxamine, and their progression of Alzheimer's disease slowed or stopped. Wow. Desferoxamine is a powerful aluminum chelator. You inject it intramuscularly a couple of times a day. And what it does is it grabs the aluminum out of the body and the brain and removes it. Now you say, why is this not popular since this has been described for 40 or 50 years? There's no money in it. This is a generic product. There's no interest in sharing with you the treatment of Alzheimer's with desferoxamine, but I would think some people know it. The excuse I hear given often is, well, it's just too painful to give somebody an intramuscular shot twice a day. Well, excuse me, what do you think it's like living with an Alzheimer's patient?
Yeah.
Or being an Alzheimer's patient? It's just money. Anyway, the other thing I want to add is there are no medications that are on the market from the pharmaceutical industry that doctors can prescribe that will in any way change the course of Alzheimer's. Every single one of them is a failure. Even though they come out with, all these advertisements, we had this great new discovery, when you put it to the test, it doesn't work. Why? Well, because Alzheimer's is due to aluminum poisoning. The only way you're going to stop the poisoning, well, you can change your diet, which is really important, because that'll shut down the absorption of aluminum, but you could also stop spraying aluminum in your nose and eating it with your fork and spoon out of cans and pots and pans. And stop doing this. Okay. The other way to do this, to take the aluminum out of the body, is with a commonly sold silica water. Okay. Notice this is not called silicon. It's called silica. And silica removes the aluminum via the kidneys. It's an organic substance. It is found in various plant products. There are teas that have high silica contents. Okay, 10 milligrams a day. And look at these bottles, they provide 90 milligrams in a bottle. 10 milligrams of silica a day is associated with a reduced risk of getting Alzheimer's.
Beautiful. I take it.
So you can buy these. They're on the internet. They're in your grocery store. They're silica containing waters. Or you can buy teas, herb teas, like horsetail and bamboo. And you can look it up. You guys have computers. You can look it up. And by the way, the references are all there in the bottom right-hand corner for you. Okay, so anyway, you got it. That's the first time shared that information with people on this slideshow.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, okay, well, how many? Okay, so we know where it comes from. They add it to the food. We know we can spray it. What's your awareness around aluminum in the atmosphere? So spray it in the air.
Unless you work in a manufacturing plant that is processing aluminum, such as brake liners, not a problem.
Okay.
But if you're going to work in an industry, which is the way people used to get inhaled aluminum, that's a problem.
Okay, interesting. Just because we talked about the subject with geoengineering, and one of the ways that the researching stopping the sun from being so heating for the planet is by putting these reflective metals in the air, and one of them is aluminum.
Well, you're gonna have a lot of demented people running around.
Yeah, I'm afraid that.
Why don't you just make mirrors out of plastic bottles and aluminum cans? And why don't you put a bunch of mirrors in your backyard? What you're going to learn when you go to meer.org, or you listen to on my website an interview with Yi Tao. Just go to YouTube and write Yi Tao and McDougall, or just Tao and McDougall, T-A-O. You'll hear this interview about how we have a practical means of taking plastic bottles we're dumping by the billions and aluminum cans which are dumping by the billions, and through an energy efficient way to turn them into mirrors to reflect the energy of the sun back out into outer space. It's our only chance. Yeah. Spread the news, folks.
Yeah, so that will make sense. And so, you made a point. A lot of people will have more dementia if they don't clean their diet up and if they don't detox from these metals. What's your thought on, have you ever heard of zeolite clay?
What is it called?
Zeolite.
No, I don't know anything about it.
No, so it's it's used, the food grade part of it, because there is also non-food grade where you can just apply it on the skin. The food grade part of it binds metals, not just aluminum, but different kind of metals, and is meant to obviously be then discarded by your body through your digestive system. So that's something that I've been looking into, that I feel it's also a good option. I'm curious. So silica, I buy silica gel that I put in my water.
Yeah, that's
is that good?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, cool. I use it for my hair and my nails actually, but it's good. It's good that it detoxes.
Again, it's not silicon.
No, silica.
It's silica.
Yeah.
And there are lots of products you can increase your silica intake very inexpensively, very safely, and you got nothing to lose. But stop contacting aluminum. It's not a good idea. Change your diet. Stop eating the poisonous Western diet. The poisonous Western diet, it includes two major groups of poison. One is animal foods, any secretion in the animal part, whether it be ears or lips or tails or butts or legs or whatever. You don't eat them. The animal secretion that people eat most often is milk, and which is cheese. Don't eat it. I suppose you could also drink blood. Well, they do put it in sausages, don't they? But that wouldn't be an excretion. That would be something that's brought out of the body through brute force. Anyway, don't do it. And the other thing you don't do is you don't eat vegetable oil, like safflower oil, corn oil. They're toxic. The fat you eat's the fat you wear. They'll make you obese. They'll increase your risk of cancer more than anything else. They'll damage your arteries. They'll cause you to bleed. They'll suppress your immune system. Don't eat these oils except in food. Oranges are full of oil. There's orange oil. There's plenty of oil in oranges, but it's complex with other phytonutrients, so it's always safe. Even the oil found in nuts and seeds and olives and avocados. As long as you eat the whole plant, it's safe. But you take the oil out of the nuts or the seeds or the avocados, and what you're left behind are all the protein, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the fiber, all the phytates, all the protective ingredients. And you are now eating an isolated, concentrated nutrient that at best is a medicine, but at worst is a serious toxin. Don't do that. As people are transitioning, what we found, and I've been taking care of people like this with diet therapy for 46 years. Then we used to run a hospital-based program. We used to run a resort-based program. And now we run a telemedicine program that people all over the world take advantage of. You'll find that at drmcdougall.com. What I find is people come to us and they made some transition, just like I did when I first started this back in, I guess it was 1976 that I first learned about, the food I ate was important. And we went through a transition. We went from grain-fed beef to range-fed beef and white rice to brown rice and more fish and more chicken. We were trying. And then the next step we made is we went on a lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. In other words, we ate eggs and dairy. Figured out that was toxic too. And then we went on a vegan diet, a pure vegetarian diet. Well, the problem with pure vegetarian diets is they're swimming in oil. And that's where a lot of you are right now. You figured out a lot of this stuff. You figured out it's not good to eat the animals. It's not good for the animals. It's not good for the planet. And it's killing you. So you figured that out and you've got them out of your diet. And you probably even figured that cheese is really bad for you. The only way you'll eat cheese is if they put salt in it. Otherwise, it's disgusting. Anyway, they load it with salt so they fool you and you eat it and think you like it. But I know you made these changes. You're either vegetarian or you're vegan, but your diet is still swimming in oil, and that's why you don't feel well. That's why you're not losing the weight. You must get the oil out of the diet. For example, in China before 1980, some of you are old enough to remember before 1980. I certainly am. In China before 1980, the diet was 90% rice. They had no obesity. They had no type 2 diabetes. Okay. Virtually no heart disease or breast cancer or colon cancer or prostate cancer. Since 1980 and the modernization of Asia through our cable news and our abilities to transport and transmit everything, the Asian countries have become as wealthy as the European countries in the United States, in Canada and Australia. This has happened over the last 40 years. And now you find, for example, in the Chinese, that 12% of them are frankly diabetic and half are pre-diabetic. Obesity is not rare anymore. Overweight is common. You guys, I know you can see this. Just open your eyes and look.
I know. I think what's happened is that we normalized the new sizes that we see every day. And that's happening in many places where, most people are overweight. So you think that's the norm. And we know it's not. And, all the doctors like you that think about lifestyle medicine and nutrition, plant-based nutrition, talk about it. But it's true that the common understanding, unless somebody's severely obese, you really think that being overweight is normal. It's a good weight. And we know that it's not. The moment that you have fat over your muscles, that's a little, warning bell, because you don't want to have fat on your muscles. You want to see muscles. You want to be lean so that you can be efficient in using your energy. You can be efficient in using your glucose. You become insulin sensitive instead of being resistant to it. But this is not common knowledge just yet, because we're not told, unless you're obviously listening to podcasts like this, or you are even, studying medicine, but even doctors sometimes look very confused about the state of health. And I mean, I say this with love. I don't want to be judgmental, but I went to take my blood test, and the doctor that owns the practice where I am in Portugal is severely overweight. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is not right. You should be in a good shape. You're telling people how to be healthy, or you should be. So, there's a little bit of dissonance around the weight of the
Well,
world.
your observations are very correct. When I was a young person, the people in advertisements were trim. And now pretty much everybody advertising cars to heaters, to air conditioners, to food. So they're all overweight. They're not obese yet, but they're overweight. But obesity is increasing. For the United States, the obesity rates in some parts of our country, like the Southeast, are 40%, with another 40% being overweight. And the prediction is in 8 years, and by 2030, that 70% of the people in the Southeast of the United States will be obese. So we'll have to upsize again in the commercials.
Yeah.
But there are a whole bunch of reasons. It's just another sign of food poisoning. Just keep the mantra in mind: the fat you eat is the fat I wear. And it's pretty simple. And I guarantee you, every single one of you that wants to lose 5 pounds to 50 pounds to 150 pounds, I guarantee you, if you get the fat out of the diet and the starch in the diet and a few vegetables and fruits, you will lose the weight. Always. Never an exception. There used to be populations of 2 billion Asians before 1980. Nobody was overweight. But today it's changed. And it's the same thing around in Europe. First time I went to Italy in 1970, everybody was trim. I got upset because when I ordered a pizza, they didn't put any cheese on my pizza. Last time I went to Europe, Italy, and didn't make it to Portugal, but did make it to many of the other countries. I couldn't tell the American tourist from the native person in the European country. They're catching up rapidly with the American way. Everybody wants to be like an American.
Yeah. Very true.
And it's, of course, energy expensive. You were kind of touching on that. Can you imagine carrying around all these obese people in airplanes, how much it costs?
Yeah.
We used to joke when I ran the program. Well, still we joke, the telemedicine program, which we run every month. Last program we had 50 people from around the world: Portugal, Sydney, Shanghai, Moscow, all over the world. We had 50 people, and in 12 days, the total weight loss was 150 pounds.
Wow.
That's one in 12 days. And it always happens. It's unrestricted eating. You can eat as much as you want. Really tasty food. Foods that you love, like pastas and oatmeal and bean burritos and mushu vegetables over rice. You just got to get the oil out and the animals out of the food. You get to eat your soups, like your bean soup, your potato soup, all your favorite soups are vegetable soups. You just leave the dead animal parts out in the oils. It's really good. You put all your favorite spices in, maybe a little salt, maybe a little sugar. On the surface, the food will be better so that you can taste it. And you end up getting this phenomenal results. We have published in the scientific literature. We have published our results. We have, for example, one publication of 10 years of running our program at a resort, which includes 1,703 people, nobody excluded. The average weight loss in 7 days, 1 week, was 3.1 pounds. The average drop in blood pressure was 18/11 millimeters of mercury, and those people had high blood pressure. The average drop in cholesterol was 22 milligrams per deciliter, which is about 0.8 of an international unit. You have to divide by 38. That's what happened in 7 days. Plus, we got nearly 90% of people off all their medication, or reduced it at least, particularly the blood pressure diabetic medications. We get essentially every diabetic who's type 2 off their medication. Who's truly type 2, we get them all off. Some of them are not quite type 2, and we put them on a little bit of long-acting insulin, but they get the kind of medical care that they need. I wish their doctors would give them, but they're not, because in part, one of the reasons is we're taught nothing about human nutrition in medical school, except for a few biochemical formulas.
Yeah.
We're taught nothing about diet therapy. And I've been on this campaign for many, many years. In the year 2011, which is 11 years ago.
Yes.
2011, I got SB 380 passed in the state of California, which forces the 11 medical schools in California to teach diet therapy, which forces the 500 hospitals in California to have noontime conferences about the human diet. So, like I said, I've been working on this a long time. Many other people are too. Of this serious neglect of the education of our doctors because they have no idea what human beings eat.
Yeah. I was talking to, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it'd be as silly as having a veterinarian not know what a dog eats or a cat or a bird.
Yeah.
Now, they're experts on the human being, and you ask them what to eat. Oh, I hear the keto diet's really good. Or you got to eat a well-balanced diet. Or, I heard this vegetarian thing. And lots of people are getting vegetarian. They have no idea. These are your doctors, with some exceptions, though. There are exceptions out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to Dr. Clapper last week about he's doing a program called Moving Medicine Forward, which is really about educating doctors, which is really, really good. And I actually reached out to a very young man who is studying medicine in Finland. And I asked him if he would be interested to connect to some of his peers and do this. And thankfully, he was a little bit more aware about nutrition. And he even confirmed they don't study anything. Like maybe they just learn about carbohydrates, protein, and fats, and that's about it. They don't really go deep into it at all. So, even if there are universities that go a little bit deeper into nutrition, but again, it's driven by the industry. So they will learn about the classic, you need meat for protein, otherwise you'll shrivel up and die. And so, it's a very long journey to education. I actually have a question about the relationship between being overweight and holding on to higher amounts of heavy metals such as aluminum. Is that a correlation between the two? And I know we talked about animal products, but I'm talking about someone that perhaps stopped eating animal products and still has. I
don't know this relationship. I don't know that heavy metals are fat soluble, but pesticides are. DDT is. Most of your herbicides and pesticides are fat soluble, and so they're sucked up and concentrated in your body fat. But I don't think metals are.
Okay, so why is it the place that they go most lodging is in the brain, aside from obviously when we inhale them?
Well, that's what does its damage. It's all over the body. Aluminum is all over the body. But where it does its damage is in our sensitive tissues in the brain.
Okay.
There are certain heavy metals like cobalt, which poisons the heart muscle, and you go into heart failure. Or iron poisons the liver, and you develop a hemochromatosis. So there are some end organs that are particularly harmed by different minerals. And I just gave you some excellent examples: cobalt in the heart, iron in the liver, and aluminum in the brain. So, but the minerals are all over the body.
What about mercury?
It's a neurotoxin. You should never. No good dentist these days should be putting aluminum amalgams. You should be using gold or porcelain or plastic. These are the things. They're strong materials, have been well developed. There's no excuse. But the question comes up for me sometimes, used a lot more in the past, is I have mercury fillings. What should I do about it, doc? And the answer is, as long as they haven't failed you, don't do anything. Because if you remove them, what happens is you release a tremendous amount of mercury. And unless you have a special dental office, which is designed to pick up these released methyl or mercury molecules, then you end up breathing them in, and you get a tremendous amount of mercury into your system just from having them removed. So don't remove the ones that are intact. You'll lose tooth. You'll expose yourself to mercury. No reason to do it. But And when you have to have new ones or the old ones fail, they're not going to put a mercury amalgams back in you. I don't think so. Not any dentist I'd go visit. Not many dentists these days are foolish enough to hold on to that argument, at least that I've heard of.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I know, for example, we go to a biological dentist, so that I know for sure will not use any of those. But I think there is still this difference between your classic dentist and your biological dentist, unless it's only marketing. We pay 5 times more the price. I don't know. But from what I've seen, actually, yeah, they are much more mindful about that and using any of these heavy metals. And you touched on water. Can I ask you, do you use a filtering system at home?
We get our water from well, let's see, Sierra Water, I believe Sierra Water. We have bottles of water brought in, but I've done lots of things in the past. I've had osmotic filters. You need clean water. You can buy it from various sources, and I think you should insist on it being clean. Check your community water supply and see if they test. There are people who have good, clean water that comes out of the tap, but unfortunately, there are too many highly contaminated water sources. So yeah, you have to drink clean water.
And if fluoride is in the water, as we talked about, aluminum.
Well, it's in community water. It's not your bottled water.
Yeah, I'm talking about tap water. Yes.
You know why they put it in? They put it in the water. It reduces the risk of tooth decay. It does.
Yeah.
But you can do this. And by the way, the margins of safety are very small. The difference between therapeutic dose of fluoride and the toxic dose, where you end up getting chiclet teeth and other damage to the body and possibly an increased risk of cancer. The difference between a therapeutic dose, which reduces the risk of tooth decay, and a toxic dose is very small. And the problem is we're getting fluoride from so many sources. We're getting it from vitamin pills that we're feeding our kids and ourselves. We're getting it from toothpaste, and we're getting it from the community water supply. I don't think we should put it in the community water supply. Why in the world do we put fluoride when the bulk of the water is used to wash cars and to sprinkle your lawn? It just seems like an awful waste of fluoride. But why is it wasted? Because there's something called the aluminum fluoride industry, and they make a ton of money selling this waste product, fluoride, to communities. That's why it is. That's why it exists. And the right thing to do is to decide as a parent whether you want to take advantage of fluoride and get a toothpaste with a little fluoride in it or a vitamin pill with a little fluoride in it, and don't overdose your kids.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. McDougall. As always, a pleasure.
It is. It is. I hope people like what they hear. I certainly don't pull any punches about what I try and tell you. And I love being a doctor. And I love being a doctor who takes care of patients who end up getting well, not just managed. The medical business is a business of managing. It's your doctors are switching you from one brand of pill to the next and taking care of the side effects of whatever treatment they offered. There's a cure for disease, and that's to stop the cause. And the cause is the food. So I look forward to the next chance I get to share with your audience, and I hope this gets some attention.
Thank you so much. We'll have you back for sure.
All right.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. McDougall, and thank you everyone for staying on for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and found it educational. If you want to learn more, please go into the show notes, and all the links to studies and articles are there, as well as please go to YouTube and you can see the presentation as a visual, so you can see also the studies that have been quoted in the presentation, and look them up if you wish. I've also added other resources for you to look into Alzheimer's disease, as well as my favorite way of detoxing from heavy metals, including aluminum, which is zeolite clay. As always, I always feel that having a good digestive system is important, so I've linked another episode with Dr. Will Bolsevitz, who talks about a healthy gut, and I think it's really key to have that in order to detox our body. And so yeah, have a look and have fun. I will see you next week. Give us some feedback, share, and like this episode so we can keep on growing. Bye.